The elevator doors slid open and I stepped into Diane Harlow's penthouse suite with a folder pressed against my chest. She had called me at 9 that evening. The quarterly projections needed correcting before the morning board meeting. I drove across the city without questioning it because that was who I was. Dependable. Always there. Never late. I made it 3 steps inside before I heard laughter from down the hallway. Low. Soft. Intimate. I kept walking. The bedroom door was half open. I didn't mean to look. But my feet stopped and my eyes moved forward and the folder slipped from my hands before I understood what I was seeing. Papers scattered across the marble floor like everything I had worked for reduced to noise. My husband Cole was there. Shirtless. And the woman beneath him was my boss. Diane looked up and met my eyes without flinching. No panic. No shame. Cole turned slowly. No guilt on his face. Just irritation. "We've been together 7 months, Diane said calmly. "And that promotion track you believed in? It was never real. It kept you manageable." Cole looked at me like I was standing in the wrong room. "You should have paid more attention," he said. I walked out without a word. Down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby, and into the cold night air. I didn't cry. I refused to give either of them that. My name is Nora Bennett. I am 34 years old. And for the past 6 years I had been a senior financial analyst at Harlow Capital. I gave that company everything: late nights, weekends, holidays I didn't take. I believed in the work and I believed in the future Diane had promised me. I sat in my car outside the building for a long time without starting the engine. Then my phone buzzed. An email from HR, timestamped 11:42 at night. It came from Diane's assistant and described me as an employee who had shown unprofessional and erratic behavior during a work visit. It recommended immediate administrative leave pending a formal review. She hadn't even waited until morning. By 7 the next day, my work login credentials no longer existed. I drove home through streets that felt completely unfamiliar. When I turned onto our road, the lights inside the house were already on. Cole's car sat in the driveway, which surprised me. He had still been at Diane's when I left. He must have moved quickly. I walked inside. My suitcase was open on the bedroom floor. My clothes were folded neatly inside it. My toiletries were in a plastic bag set beside it. Cole stood at the window with his arms crossed, calm the way a person is calm when they have rehearsed something many times. He told me the house was in his name. I already knew that. He had insisted on it 3 years earlier. Explaining it simplified our tax situation. I had trusted him completely. I had never looked further. Standing there staring at my packed bags, I understood that nothing about that decision had been accidental. He picked up my keys from the counter and held them out. "You'll be fine," he said. "You always land on your feet." My friend Cara let me sleep on her couch without asking too many questions. She made tea and kept the television low, and gave me the kind of quiet that only a real friend knows how to offer. I lay in the dark long after she went to bed, staring at my phone. My mind kept returning to details I had brushed aside over the past year. The late meetings Cole never fully explained. The evenings he came home smelling like a restaurant I had never been to with him. Then I remembered something small. 3 years earlier, Cole and I had set up a shared cloud account for vacation photos. He had never disconnected it. Neither had I. I opened it and logged in. There were photos I had never seen. Receipts. Calendar entries dated over the past 14 months. And a folder of type notes that looked like planning documents, financial discussions, property references, account numbers. My hands went cold as I scrolled through them. Near the bottom of one document, I found 2 words that made my stomach drop entirely. Money moved. I spent the next 3 hours going through every document in that cloud folder. The transfers started small. $50 here. $200 there. Amounts that would disappear into any normal monthly statement without standing out. But they were not random. They followed a clear pattern, pulling money from our joint accounts in regular cycles across 14 months. The destination accounts were registered under company names I had never encountered. But one name kept reappearing in the documentation: Harlow Capital Holdings, a subsidiary connected directly to Diane's firm. Cole hadn't just been cheating on me. He and Diane had been quietly using our joint finances as a personal funding source, while I worked late making sure those same accounts stayed healthy. The last document in the folder was the worst. It was a brief internal memo referencing a digital authorization, supposedly signed by me, approving a significant transfer I had never agreed to and had no knowledge of. Someone had forged my electronic signature. Based on the timestamp, it had been done months ago. The pain was still there. But something had shifted underneath it, something cold, focused, and precise. I did not call Cole. I did not send Diane an angry message. I did not speak to anyone except Kara, and only to ask if I could borrow her printer. The first thing I did was open a new bank account at a different institution entirely, in my name only. I moved my personal savings, money Cole had no access to, somewhere completely safe. Then I printed every document from the cloud folder. I organized them by date, wrote descriptions on sticky notes, and placed them carefully on each relevant page. I emailed copies of everything to a private address I created that morning. I kept a second physical set in a sealed envelope inside Kara's closet. I was not going to react the way they expected me to. No shouting. No falling apart. No desperate calls in the middle of the night. They thought they knew exactly how I would respond to losing everything. They were completely wrong. That afternoon, I found the name of a forensic accountant and sent him a message. His name was Alan Ford, and he agreed to meet me 2 days later at a quiet coffee shop on the east side. I brought my printed documents and organized folder. He spent 40 minutes reading through everything without saying much. Just occasional quiet sounds, the kind that meant something had registered. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at me directly. "This is financial fraud," he said. "Funds misappropriated through falsified authorization, moved through shell entities connected to a registered company. That's identity misuse and potential corporate embezzlement. 2 separate violations." I asked him what I needed to do first. He leaned forward. "Nothing yet. Move too early and they'll see it coming. They'll restructure those accounts, clean up what they can, and build a defense before anything becomes formal. You need leverage first. Something they can't simply make disappear." I thought about that for a moment. I had spent 6 years building a detailed, working knowledge of Harlow Capital's internal financial systems from the inside. The leverage had been with me the entire time. 2 days after meeting with Alan, I called Diane's assistant and asked for a meeting. I kept my voice small, uncertain. I said I had overreacted. I said I understood if there needed to be a conversation about my position going forward. I said I just wanted to keep working. The meeting was set for the following morning. Diane sat behind her desk and studied me with the patient expression of someone who had already decided how everything would end. She told me the senior analyst position was no longer suitable given recent circumstances. She could offer a junior support role in the data entry division, reporting to a team leader 3 levels below where I had been. She said it gently, like she was doing me a favor by offering anything at all. I thanked her. I accepted without a moment's hesitation. My former colleagues watched from behind the glass walls as I was walked to the lower floor. Some looked away. A few looked genuinely sorry. None of that mattered. I was back inside the building. I arrived early every day and stayed late every evening. I made myself as quiet and unremarkable as possible, which wasn't difficult because nobody in that building was paying close attention to the woman in data entry anymore. They had already processed me as someone who had lost. But I was paying very close attention to all of them. My reduced access still gave me visibility into archived financial logs as a regular part of my work tasks. I was careful. I never pulled anything in a single session that might look unusual. I spread my research across small, routine-looking actions. I kept handwritten notes in a small notebook I carried in my bag and transferred everything to an encrypted folder on my private laptop each evening. 3 weeks in, I found something I hadn't been looking for. An email thread from 18 months earlier between Diane and an employee who had since left the company. The tone was unmistakable, intimate and pointed, and it was followed 3 months later by a sudden, unexplained resignation. This was not the first time Diane had done something exactly like this. I dug further. What I found was not a series of separate incidents. It was a pattern. Over the past 4 years, at least 3 other employees had left Harlow Capital under quiet, unexplained circumstances. Each had held a promising role that brought them into close contact with Diane. Each had signed a non-disclosure agreement on their way out. Documents buried in routine HR files, written to sound standard but containing unusually broad restrictions on discussing the company environment. I cross-referenced their departure dates with internal financial records. In 2 of the 3 cases, company funds had moved in the months before each resignation. Small transfers with routine-sounding descriptions. Nothing that would raise a flag unless you already knew what to look for. This was not personal. This was a system. Diane had spent years using professional closeness as leverage and financial movement as a cleanup tool. And she had done it quietly enough that no single person had ever connected all the pieces. Then I found the merger documents. A pending deal worth over $40 million. I stayed at my desk until 7 that evening to read through them properly. The merger involved a mid-sized investment group seeking to acquire a portion of Harlow Capital's portfolio. The deal had been progressing for months. On the surface, the documentation looked professional and complete. But when I compared the asset valuations in the merger filing against the internal financial records I had been quietly reviewing, the numbers did not match. The internal records reflected the real figures. The merger documents showed numbers that were significantly higher. The difference was not a formatting issue or a rounding error. It was a deliberate inflation. Someone had constructed a picture of Harlow Capital's financial health, specifically designed to mislead incoming investors into believing the company was worth considerably more than it was. I kept reading. Near the back of the document was a section listing key approvals. Financial authorization for the final merger filing required a named signatory from within the organization. The name listed was Cole Bennett. My husband had signed off on fraudulent investor documents. I called Alan that night and told him about the merger documents. He was quiet for a long moment, then told me to contact a lawyer before doing anything else. Her name was Beth Crawford. She specialized in financial litigation and corporate misconduct. I found her through a bar association referral and met her at a downtown office the following afternoon. I told her I wasn't there about a divorce. Not yet. I needed strategy first. Beth listened carefully. She reviewed everything I had brought and asked precise, direct questions. She didn't look surprised by any of it, which somehow made it worse. She told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. Gathering. Documenting. Waiting. The goal was a case strong enough to file on multiple fronts at the same time, so that neither Diane nor Cole could respond to one action before another one landed. Start recording every interaction you have with both of them, she said. Conversations, meetings, phone calls, all of it. I agreed. I started the very next morning. Cole reached out 2 weeks after my demotion. A text message first. Simple. Just checking in on you. I stared at it before responding. Then I typed back. I'm okay. Just taking it day by day. I kept my tone small and uncertain, just enough to leave the door barely open. He called 3 days later. His voice had changed from the cold, rehearsed tone of the night he had packed my bags. Now it was softer. Careful. He asked how I was managing. Said he had been thinking about things. I played along. I asked gentle questions and let him talk. I kept my recorder running every single time. He began calling more regularly after that. Each conversation I gave him just enough warmth to keep him coming back. I never pushed. I just listened. Then one evening, while explaining why a particular wire transfer had been delayed, he mentioned something briefly and moved past it quickly. An offshore account registered through a holding company in the Cayman Islands. He didn't realize what he had just handed me. I took the name of the holding company to Alan the following morning. He ran it through the financial registry databases he had used before. It returned immediately. A Cayman Islands entity opened 22 months earlier. No visible business activity. No clients. No public records of operation. But it had received substantial transfers from 3 different source accounts. 2 matched the shell accounts Alan had already traced to the unauthorized withdrawals from my joint savings. The 3rd source account was registered to Harlow Capital Holdings, the same subsidiary connected directly to Diane. The offshore account was the common thread. Every piece of the fraud, the stolen joint funds, the corporate misappropriation, and the inflated merger valuations, all connected back to that single holding company. It tied Cole and Diane together in a way that had no innocent explanation. Alan set his pen down and said quietly, "You have everything." I looked at him across the desk. The merger was scheduled to finalize in exactly 1 week. Beth and I met that evening. She reviewed Alan's new findings and sat quietly for a long moment before speaking. She said we were close but not ready to release everything yet. Moving too fast would give them time to coordinate a defense and frame any irregularities as routine clerical errors during restructuring. We needed external pressure building before we delivered the complete case from inside. She suggested an anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission, just enough information to flag the merger as needing review, without revealing the full scope of what we had. Enough to trigger a quiet look. Nothing more yet. I wrote the tip carefully, using only details already present in the public merger filing, combined with a clear statement that the reported valuations appeared inconsistent with the company's internal records. Beth submitted it through a secure channel the following morning. 3 days later, Alan's contact at a financial compliance office confirmed that 2 external auditors had been quietly assigned to the Harlow Capital merger file. The change inside the building was immediate and unmistakable. Diane started arriving earlier than usual and staying later, moving through the hallways with the tight, controlled energy of someone managing something she hadn't prepared for. Internal meetings were called with little notice. Doors that normally stayed open started quietly closing. I watched it all from the data entry floor and kept my face completely neutral. Cole's phone calls became shorter and more distracted. He started asking me careful questions, whether I had heard anything at the office, whether anyone had mentioned the merger review. I gave him nothing useful, just enough to make him feel like the conversation was still safe. Neither of them had looked in my direction. The woman in data entry was not a threat in their minds. She was a casualty they had already processed and moved past. I let them keep believing that. Then I sent 2 calendar invitations, one to Diane's assistant requesting a brief check-in about my performance, and one to Cole asking to meet in person. Both accepted the same day. I met with Cole first, at a coffee shop near the house he had kept. He was relaxed. Too relaxed. He ordered for both of us without asking and leaned back in his chair like a man who had already made peace with how everything had settled. He said he thought a clean, quiet divorce might be the right next step for both of us. He wanted me to agree before he filed anything formally. I nodded. I asked soft questions about the terms he had in mind. I let him describe the financial arrangement he was imagining. He confirmed on recording that certain assets had been restructured over the past 2 years for what he called strategic business reasons. My meeting with Diane the following afternoon was shorter. She asked about my work progress and offered a brief, dismissive performance review. She signed a routine acknowledgement form I had prepared in advance and passed to her assistant. Her signature. On a dated, formally witnessed document. That form would matter considerably later. Beth filed the divorce petition on a Thursday morning. The timing was calculated precisely. The SEC auditors had been working quietly for 6 days. The merger was 3 days from finalizing. Cole had no reason to expect anything formal was approaching. The petition included evidence of infidelity, documented through the cloud account records, the photographs, and Cole's own recorded conversations. It also included Alan's full forensic report on the unauthorized fund transfers from our joint accounts, including the forged digital authorization bearing my name on a transaction I had never approved or agreed to. Beth simultaneously filed a civil claim against Cole for financial misconduct, triggering an immediate asset freeze on all accounts named in the forensic report. Cole called me 47 minutes after the papers were served. His voice had none of the easy confidence I had been listening to over the previous weeks. It was higher now. Urgent. My accounts are frozen, he said. I let a short silence pass. I know, I said. Then I ended the call. The SEC made its first formal public move 2 days later. A statement confirmed that the Harlow Capital merger had been placed under regulatory review pending examination of reported financial discrepancies. The language was careful, but in the financial world, words like discrepancies carry significant weight. Investors pay very close attention to them. The acquiring investment group responded within hours, announcing they were suspending all merger activity until the review was concluded. Inside Harlow Capital, the reaction was immediate. An emergency board meeting was called that same afternoon. I sat at my data entry desk and watched through the glass walls as people moved quickly across the upper floor. Faces tight, phones pressed against ears, conversations sharp and hushed. By the end of that day, An internal announcement went out to all staff. Diane had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of both the regulatory review and a separate internal investigation now underway. She had walked into that building 11 years ago and constructed something that looked powerful from every angle. In one afternoon, the foundation came completely apart. Beth released the full evidence package the following morning. It went to the SEC Investigative Unit, the State Financial Regulatory Authority, and 3 financial journalists who had been covering the merger story. The package contained Alan's complete forensic report, the documented fund transfers from my joint accounts, the offshore holding company records, the forged digital authorization, the internal email threads showing the pattern of conduct toward former employees, and the merger's falsified valuations. Every piece was independently verified. Every claim was anchored directly to a document. The financial news coverage accelerated by afternoon. The story shifted from merger under review to something far more serious. Reports described a sustained pattern of internal financial misconduct and coercion at Harlow Capital extending back more than 4 years. By evening, 3 former employees had contacted Beth independently. All 3 had signed non-disclosure agreements on departure. All 3 said they were now willing to speak. The narrative had completely reversed. Diane and Cole were no longer controlling the story. The story was controlling them. Diane's administrative leave became a permanent separation within 10 days. The board issued a formal statement removing her as CEO, citing conduct inconsistent with the fiduciary responsibilities of executive leadership. The financial press was less restrained. Headlines covered the full picture: the inflated valuations, the misappropriated funds, the pattern of coercive conduct toward subordinates over multiple years, the offshore account. Her name was now attached to a very specific kind of story, the kind that follows a person permanently. The civil lawsuits arrived first. 3 former employees filed claims within a week of coming forward, supported by the documentation Beth had assembled. The non-disclosure agreement provisions were challenged on grounds of coercion, and 2 were invalidated by preliminary court rulings. Then came the filing that mattered most. 10 days after the civil claims were submitted, the SEC and the State Financial Crimes Unit jointly filed formal criminal charges against Diane Harlow. Fraud, securities violations, coercion, misuse of corporate funds. Cole's situation unraveled on a separate track but at the same speed. The civil financial misconduct claim Beth had filed against him was strengthened by Alan's forensic report and the recorded phone conversations where Cole had confirmed, in his own words, that assets had been restructured for undisclosed personal purposes. His attorney tried to frame everything as routine financial management. The judge reviewing the preliminary motion was not persuaded. The asset freeze was extended. The offshore holding company came under formal examination, and connected bank records were subpoenaed. The house, the one where he had packed my suitcase and walked me out, was listed among the frozen assets pending both the divorce settlement and the civil claim findings. Cole could no longer access it freely. He had moved in with a work colleague. He called me 6 times across 1 week. I let every single one go to voicemail. On the 7th call, he left a message. His voice was unsteady in a way I had genuinely never heard from him before. "Nora, please," he said. "I made a mistake." I agreed to meet him once at a public cafe, with Beth aware of the location. He was already waiting when I arrived. He looked smaller. Tired. The easy confidence that used to fill a room was completely gone. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He said Diane had pulled him into the financial arrangements, and that he had never intended for things to go this far. He said he was sorry. I let him finish without interrupting. Then I asked him one question. "When do you think I first found out what was really happening?" He thought about it. "Probably around the time of the merger investigation becoming public," he said. "Or when the accounts were frozen." I shook my head. "I found the transfers the night I slept at my friend's apartment," I said. 3 days after you told me to leave. I had already spoken to a forensic accountant before you picked up the phone to check in on me the very first time." He went very still. He had believed those early phone calls were him staying in control of the situation. He had been talking to someone who already knew everything. I didn't stop there. I placed a printed document on the table between us. 15 pages. A clean, complete timeline running from the night of the declined card to the morning Beth filed the divorce petition. Every key date, every transfer, every recorded conversation, every piece of evidence, organized so that nothing could be disputed or misread. I walked him through it without raising my voice. The cloud account, the shell accounts, Ellen's full forensic analysis, the anonymous SEC tip, the merger documents, the offshore account he had mentioned on a phone call, he thought was completely private. Every move he and Diane had made together, I had documented and countered. Everything they believed they had taken from me, I had been quietly rebuilding from the moment they pushed me out the front door. Cole sat across the table and said nothing for a long time. When I reached the final page, I closed the folder and looked at him directly. "You didn't destroy me," I said. "You handed me the reason to rebuild better." I stood up and walked out. 6 months later, I was sitting at a desk in a small office I had rented with my own money. One window faced the street below. A bookshelf stood against the far wall, slowly filling up. My name was on the door. Not as someone's analyst, not as someone's wife. Just Nora Bennett, Financial Consulting. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier. The civil settlement returned the misappropriated joint funds with interest. The house had been sold as part of the asset division, and my share gave me the foundation I needed to start over properly. Diane's criminal trial was set to begin in the spring. Her attorneys had already filed 2 delays. Cole had settled for far less than he had planned and relocated out of state. I hadn't heard from him since the day I walked out of that cafe. Sometimes I thought about the night in that penthouse. The sound the folder made when it hit the marble floor. They took my trust, my marriage, and my career. In the end, I took everything that actually mattered.